Welcome and a very warm Christmas Eve here from beautiful Margaret River in Western Australia. So yeah, while we wait for 5:30 to come along, if you guys have any questions, basically today we'll talk a little bit about Sri Lanka, and then yeah, your questions about what it's like to visit there in 2023, and yeah, more generally what you want to know a bit more about the channel, what's ahead in 2024, etc, etc. It's been a very beautiful day here in lovely Margaret River here in the southwest of Western Australia. It's about a 275 kilometre drive, or about a 3-hour drive south of Perth. Actually got interstate flights here these days from Melbourne to Busselton Margaret River Airport, and yeah, next year there'll also be flights from Sydney to Busselton Margaret River Airport as well, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, yeah, so first things first, I went to Sri Lanka in August of this year. Absolutely amazing trip, first time going to Sri Lanka, really enjoyed it, had an absolute blast there. Been to nearly 50 countries in the world. Sri Lanka is definitely one of my all-time favourite places. Very authentic place to visit. Very cheap and affordable place to visit as well. Really got lively culture, very colourful place, and the scenery in Sri Lanka is absolutely breathtaking. You know, whether it's the beaches, the mountains, yeah, it's just fantastic countryside in Sri Lanka. Didn't really find it too overwhelming as well. It's quite a chill place to sort of travel around as well. Anyway, the first question I often get about Sri Lanka, you hear a lot of sort of stuff in the media about Sri Lanka these days, you know, all the turbulence and that sort of stuff in terms of security and you know, economic crisis and all that sort of stuff that they had. Certainly has had a fairly troubled and at times tumultuous past, you could say. There's no way to sort of get around that. But yeah, today I felt pretty safe, to be honest, in Sri Lanka. I'm just talking obviously from the perspective of, you know, a guy. I can't really talk about, you know, the traveling from a female perspective, but from traveling as a guy, I found it pretty darn easy to get around in Sri Lanka. Felt pretty safe. Definitely in Colombo, definitely seemed to be quite high security there. But yeah, the only thing in Sri Lanka is the traffic is really hectic at times. The road rules are pretty well non-existent. So yeah, if you're trying to cross the road, you've got to exercise extreme caution. If you see like a traffic crossing or traffic lights, don't put your faith in them. Very rarely are they properly observed, so don't just go crossing the road in Sri Lanka thinking people are going to give way to you, because it's not usually the case. So yeah, exercise extreme caution, you know, if you're trying to get across the road. But yeah, if you're doing it on a tour like I did, you're going to have a very experienced driver. They know all the ins and outs of weaving in and out of the traffic in Sri Lanka. It's pretty hectic, the way people kind of overtake and go up the middle of, you know, oncoming and outgoing traffic and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think there is a lot in the news about Sri Lanka these days, but yeah, it certainly wasn't as confronting as what some people might think it would be. So yeah, just like any other sort of country around the world, just exercise your usual precautions. You should be fine. Obviously don't travel sort of off the beaten path, you know. There could still be a few unexploded landmines and that sort of stuff, but anywhere the tourists go, anywhere a tour is likely going to take you, you should be fine. The other question people often ask about Sri Lanka is the entry requirements. You do need a visa to go to Sri Lanka. It's $50 for most tourists. I think it's a bit cheaper for some of the ASEAN countries, but yeah, for most of us, including Australian citizens, it's going to be $50. So yeah, that's probably around 75 or something Aussie in this day and age. Just do it on the official Sri Lankan Immigration Department website. If you're, doing a tour in Sri Lanka, or you're booking through a travel agent or something like that, yeah, just go through the link that they provide. Don't try and go through third-party services or anything like that. It could be quite dodgy. But yeah, the visa process for Sri Lanka, I really think it's just a tourist tax. You do have to put in your passport details and your purpose of your stay and that sort of stuff, but you put in your visa, you do it online, it's really easy, and then you get an email saying it could take, a couple days to be processed. But yeah, I got another email like 5 minutes later saying it was approved, provided the details I provided were correct. So in other words, basically, I don't think they did too much to check it, because they're just putting the onus on me that the information is correct anyway. And if you rock up and the information isn't correct, you could have trouble. So yeah, just make sure there is all talk about getting visas on arrival and that for Sri Lanka, but yeah, just get it ahead of time. It's really the easiest way to go, in my opinion. Because yeah, when I boarded my AirAsia flight in Perth, they did ask for it, so definitely get your visa ahead of time. How much spending money do you need in Sri Lanka? I find Sri Lanka is a very incredibly affordable place. Compared to other places in Asia that used to be traditionally quite cheap, your Balis, your Thailands, all that sort of stuff, Sri Lanka seems to be a lot cheaper. Those sort of other destinations got very over touristy these days, and the prices have gone up quite steeply. So like Sri Lanka is still really affordable. Like when I went to Thailand, the prices were nowhere near as cheap as they used to be. So yeah, the currency in Sri Lanka is the Sri Lankan rupee. 220 you get for about $1 Aussie dollar, and also the highest denomination of banknote in Sri Lanka is 5,000 Sri Lankan rupees, which is only about 22 Australian dollars, believe it or not. So yeah, you really do end up with carrying quite a lot of cash in Sri Lanka, not because you need it because of the high expenses of things, but because just how low the denominations are. Like the highest denomination only being worth like $22 or something, and like if you're stuck with one of those notes, you can only usually use it at high-end sort of restaurants and places as well. If you just go to a local place with 5,000, it might be difficult finding change. So yeah, prices are really good in Sri Lanka. If you dine sort of where the locals are, you're going to get good meals for only like $1 or $2. If you go to some of the highest end sort of beach club hotels, that sort of stuff, you're going to get a very good meal, and like a cocktail or a beer or something, a large line beer, all up, $20 or $5,000, $22, something like that. You should be able to get a good meal and a good drink. So yeah, you can do Sri Lanka pretty affordably, in my opinion. You can live pretty luxurious for a couple $100 a week. accommodation being extra. Accommodation's very reasonable as well. I had like a 4.5, maybe 5-star Granville hotel in Colombo. It was even 100 Australian dollars a night. You'd probably be looking at like $400-500 a night for similar sort of accommodation in Australia. So very, very affordable Sri Lanka indeed. It's also not a very consumeristic place either, Sri Lanka. So even if you did want to spend up quite a lot, it's not like they have big sort of shopping centres and department stores, and you know, it's not like you go on a tour in New Zealand or saying it's, you know, a couple $100 for bungee jumping and a couple $100 for whitewater rafting and such. You know, you should be able to live pretty affordably in Sri Lanka, and there's not too many ways you can spend a lot of money. So that's what I like about Sri Lanka, you know. Another common question: what should you pack for Sri Lanka? Believe it or not, Sri Lanka's got quite a big range of climates, to be honest. People just automatically assume it's a tropical country. Not always necessarily the case. It's got in the highlands, it can be 2,000 meters high. So if you're getting that famous Candy to Ella train, it can actually be quite cool. Even in the towns of Ella up in the highlands, even up there, it can be, you know, mid-teens at night time. So definitely, obviously bring beach sort of wear, summer sort of wear, that sort of stuff. But definitely bring a jacket if you're going to Sri Lanka. If you are planning on going to the highlands, you don't need like a Kathmandu jacket or anything like that. But yeah, definitely bring a light jacket. Definitely bring a raincoat as well. If you do get stuck in the monsoon season, which varies depending where you are in Sri Lanka, it can be really, really wet. Like for example, when I was in Gaul, like the weather was like cyclonic almost. It was torrential rain and that sort of stuff. So definitely bring a raincoat. But yeah, it is a fairly conservative standard of dress overall by the locals in Sri Lanka. So even though it might generally be a hot, humid tropical country for the most part, the locals usually dress fairly conservatively. So if you are sort of visiting a local village, or you are going to pretty well any religious site in Sri Lanka, not just Buddhist sites, but Christian, Hindu, Muslim, whatever sites, definitely you will need to wear more modest clothing for that as well, and bring a sarong if you are wearing shorts, something like that. Otherwise just wear long pants, cover your shoulders, etc, etc. So that's for what to pack with Sri Lanka. Just adding on to that as well, there is a lot of talk about the medicine shortage and all that sort of stuff in Sri Lanka. I think that was probably more when they were having the economic recession a couple of years ago. I didn't see it was quite as dire as it was made out to be. Like, you could still get medications and that at the pharmacy, but the range is obviously not as good as back home in Australia. So I do recommend you do bring some medications with you, some preventative stuff as well, just in case you do get unwell over there. Luckily, thankfully, I wasn't unwell at all in Sri Lanka, which was really good. But yeah, just, bring some preventative stuff. Bring some Panadol, Ibuprofen. Maybe saying if you get a tummy bug, saying like that, just pays to be on the safe side. Definitely bring sunscreen as well. The sun is pretty strong, the UV in Sri Lanka, just like it is in Australia. Not easy, it's not exactly cheap sunscreen in Sri Lanka, so just bring that from home as well. definitely bring some DEET as well, mosquito repellent, something like that. I didn't find the mosquitoes as bad as I thought in Sri Lanka, even in some of the more rural areas. On the coast it's usually not too bad, but in the inland areas there is quite a lot of flies and possibly mosquitoes and that sort of stuff. So yeah, do bring some mosquito repellent, that sort of stuff. What is the best time to travel in Sri Lanka? There is kind of different seasons in Sri Lanka depending on where you are on the island. Even though it is, you think it's a pretty small country, the weather is quite varied. So I don't think, if you're seeing the whole country as a whole, I don't think there's really any time you go, it's going to have pros and cons depending on where you're visiting. So just go at a time that's convenient for you. When I went in August, it seemed pretty quiet, to be honest. Sort of in the inland parts of the country, it seemed to be really dry. High 30s, not as humid as I thought, but on the coast, so the south coast, it seemed to be really quite wet and a bit cooler. Then in the highlands, it's misty and cool kind of all year round. So yeah, it was very quiet when I was there, but like some of the resorts and that, we literally had to ourselves, and even the empty resorts, they still had the full level of staffing and that. So that seemed a bit awkward, you know. What are the main forms of transport in Sri Lanka? Well, really, your best way of getting around Sri Lanka, it is definitely, a tour is a pretty good way to go. You're not going to do a big coach tour in Sri Lanka like you would if you're in Europe or North America. You're going to go around in like a minivan sort of thing. I don't think the roads would handle coaches that well in Sri Lanka. So yeah, that's, as a tourist, that's a pretty good way to go around. It is, yeah, taking a bit of a risk if you get local buses around. The safety standards are pretty questionable, and some of the driving is pretty erratic. So yeah, I'm not trying to be judgmental there, but yeah, it might not be what you're used to if you're a foreigner, you know. You obviously can get the train around parts of the country as well. Yeah, if you're traveling light, that definitely could be an option. If you are doing like a tour, usually for that really fancy train, amazing train to Ella, usually, you know, you can keep your luggage on the bus and then just take the train. So that actually works really well. But yeah, I thought I was going to get the train from Gaul to Colombo, but yeah, at the last minute I was advised it's better just to get a private transfer, which I think cost me around 90 Australian dollars for the 3-hour drive up to Colombo. So very reasonable, the transportation costs in Sri Lanka, even if you're getting private transportation. So yeah, we've already talked about safety precautions per se. Obviously having quite a lengthy civil war that finished a long time ago now, or 2009, something like that. And unfortunately they did have the Easter bombings back in 2019. That was really quite horrific. So yeah, the risk of terrorism is definitely there in Sri Lanka, but so it is pretty well anywhere else in the world these days. I don't think anywhere is really exempt. So if you look at it in that regard, yeah, you could be unlucky in Sri Lanka, but you could be unlucky in many places in the world, including Australia. So I wouldn't let it put you off travelling to Sri Lanka. But yeah, in terms of health, obviously don't drink the water over there, just like you would in many places around the world. I usually boil the water. If you're just using it to brush your teeth, you should be fine. But anything you're going to drink, you're better just getting filtered or bottled water, just to play it on the safe side. I'm not sure how drinking boiled water would go. Chances are I've probably had it with tea and coffee at various places, but yeah, whatever you're drinking, just stick with bottled water, I reckon. And yeah, just bring a few medications to be prepared for a few eventualities as well, just so you have them on hand if you do get unwell in Sri Lanka. But luckily I didn't get any issues, so that was fantastic. Is English widely spoken in Sri Lanka? English is pretty good, to be honest. People you come across, obviously people who are orientated towards the tourist industry, the English is actually pretty good. A lot of signs on the road have English as well. So yeah, found it more than easy to get around Sri Lanka speaking English. Been in many other countries with a lot worse language barrier than Sri Lanka. Practicality wise, you can bring your own phone from Australia and roam in Sri Lanka. I just did Telstra roaming, which is pretty expensive compared to Optus and Vodafone. I think it's $10 a day as opposed to $5, but yeah, it worked fine. I wouldn't say the mobile data is that fast, at least from the network that I was on. But yeah, it seemed to be adequate. Probably most people just get a local SIM card when they arrive at Colombo airport, so that might be the best way to go. Most places you go will have Wi-Fi as well, so that's really good. Probably not going to be as blazing fast as you might be used to back at home, but yeah, you should be able to keep in touch in Sri Lanka. Currency wise, cash is generally still king in Sri Lanka, so yeah, I definitely recommend you just bring maybe around $200-300 a week for cash in Sri Lanka. I think I exchanged around 400 Australian dollars when I arrived at the airport, and it pretty well lasted me 2 weeks in Sri Lanka. They actually have interesting rules. You can't import much money into Sri Lanka, even if it's Sri Lankan rupees. Can't remember the exact amount, but yeah, so you pretty well best just to get the money when you're there. Just get out of the airport. I wouldn't bother trying to exchange it anywhere else. You can also get it from ATMs as well. Did visit ATM once, it seemed to be fine, didn't swallow my card or anything like that. So yeah, cash is king in Sri Lanka. You will be carrying around a lot of Sri Lankan rupees, just the sheer volume of money. It's quite cool to have that much money on hand. That's not actually worth much relative to Australian dollars. Card will be sometimes accepted, more than I thought, to be honest. Most sort of restaurants, higher end places catering on towards tourists, hotels, that sort of stuff, you should actually be able to use your credit cards. So that's really good. Get one with a low foreign or no foreign transaction fee like I've got, and it works quite a treat. So yeah, definitely prepare to predominantly use cash in Sri Lanka, but yeah, you can get away with card on some occasions. And yeah, I think we'll keep it short and sweet, our Q&A live stream for today. Appreciate we had that hiccup at the start, so I might very well redo the stream again tomorrow when there's a bit bigger audience. But yeah, for those who have tuned in today, I believe there's a small handful of people who have tuned in. thanks very much for tuning in today. Very exciting plans ahead for 2024. Planning to go over to Adelaide in early January, then over to Melbourne, so I'll probably review the overland train, and then I'll go over to Melbourne, spend a week or so there, probably do a V-line sort of service, a review in country Victoria. That would be really cool. Then I'll want to get the overnight XPT up to Sydney. That would be really cool. And then I've got a couple weeks traveling around the east coast. Might go to New Zealand, might go to one of the external territories, looking at Norfolk Island. That would be really cool. And that will be a really great way to kick off the year. Down here in Margaret River at the moment, that's really cool. And so there's a few videos coming from Margaret River as well. A driving video from Perth to Margaret River. Been driving around all the beautiful areas around Margaret River, both the riverside where the town is located, and also down at the beaches down at Gracetown and Prevelly. So that'll be really cool. Got a scenic drive from that. And I'll probably do some walking tours on the way back up to Perth as well. Mandurah, Bunbury, etc, etc. So that's really great. So I think I'll wind up the Q&A now. I do apologise. There we go. But thank you so much for tuning in. Very Merry Christmas wherever you might be tuning in the world. It's a lovely Christmas Eve here in Margaret River. Very beautiful evening indeed. So I think we'll wrap things up now. I'm going to go out into Margaret River for the evening. Should be a really nice night here in beautiful southwest of West Australia. So have an amazing Christmas tomorrow, whatever you're doing, wherever you are in the world. And until we meet again on the live stream, hopefully that will be tomorrow. Thanks very much for watching today. Be sure to check out my year in review premiere that we did release earlier today. That certainly didn't stuff up the launch of that. So that's all up on the channel now. That'll be really great watching over Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or whenever you get the time to watch it. So thanks very much for now. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.